From Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the studios of 850 AM WFTL, this is Outlaw, America's alternative voice. Streaming around the world at outlawshow.com. This week on Outlaw, Broward Commissioner Sue Gunzberger and her son, activist Ron Gunzberger, leaders who have championed equal rights in South Florida and across the globe. Here's your host for Outlaw, an activist and former Fort Lauderdale City Commissioner himself, Dean Trantalis.
Welcome back to our show. This is Dean Trantalis, Outlaw, America's alternative voice. We've been speaking with County Commissioner Suzanne Gunzberger and her son Ron Gunzberger. We talk a little bit about the history of equal rights and the gay community here in Broward County, and we've spoken quite a bit about the events that led to where we are today. Broward County having already implemented laws protecting people in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and now transgendered community since 1995, and most recently this year, including transgendered persons in that protective class. So we certainly have come a long way as a community, as a people. Statistics show that in Broward County, a large percentage of our population is Hispanic. A large percentage of our population is African American.
We're a minority county.
There's even a split between the African American community, we call it the American black community, and the Caribbean black community.
And so, for some reason, there still seems to be a progressive attitude held in this county, even though we have a large Hispanic and Haitian members of the community. What do you think, what do you suppose happens when you cross the border? And I don't mean the border from their countries, I mean the border from Miami-Dade.
But why are you I'm thinking some of this, why are you presuming that the Latin community has an anti-gay view where some of the countries in Latin America have full gay marriage?
Well, the reason why I bring that up is because several years ago, in 1999 and 2000, when the Equal Rights Ordinance was passed in Miami-Dade County, there was a referendum to overturn it. And despite the wildly, immensely funded gay community effort to defeat the effort, and the pathetically funded anti-gay effort to destroy the amendment, it was a 48-52% vote.
You're talking about, is that back to the Anita and Bob Quince thing?
No, I said 1999-2000. So the reality is there's still a very strong feeling south of the border, so to speak, and many people attribute that to the Latin American influence, mainly probably Cuban influence,
I would
exists in
attribute
politics.
it to the church too.
I would attribute not even that to age. I think the bulk of the voters in Dade County in those elections are, it's not just the Hispanic, again, it's that same age divide. It's the hardcore break even you see in Dade between older and younger Hispanics. I think it's an older base of Hispanic voters.
Do we have a younger Hispanic population in Broward County?
I think that
we have a different.
We have a very different.
We definitely have a different mix. There's no doubt
our
about
mix
that.
is not.
Cubans are not the
It's not
largest.
Cuban. I understand that. It's mostly South American.
Actually, no. Puerto Ricans are largest Hispanic.
Oh, is that right?
Broward, and
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans are Democrats.
Okay, so you're saying that the cultural mix, the national mix is different. Nationality mix is different.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now Ron, I've seen you lately in the news, on the street. You're now moving, as you said. Well, what do we got to do next? Where does equality go from here? And I've seen you pounding the pavement with regard to the Occupy Fort Lauderdale movement. Tell us a little bit about your activity there.
Well, it's about the Occupy movement in general. I've been just a volunteer involved in it, helping as I can, either with legal or with other things in my free time. But a large part of Occupy.
I think you minimize your role because you're spending hours and hours and hours. You've been meeting, trying to establish a beachhead in Fort Lauderdale to allow the members of the movement to permanently occupy space. People should know that the much that you've accomplished so far.
I appreciate it, but it's still the ones who do the real work are the ones out there occupying, physically occupying, which takes real effort because. I'll support the legal right to protest and fight what they're doing, but I'm really not personally inclined to be sleeping outside the City Hall chambers.
Well, I drove by City Hall Plaza today, and all I saw was a table and some chairs sitting out there. No, gone were the tents.
The tents are gone because of the court order. The sleeping bags are still there. They can do that, but they don't have the tents. They go under the overhang where it comes out after the commission chambers in inclement weather. But again, keep in mind, not just here, but here in New York and elsewhere, the Occupy movements are evolving. If you want to say they're taking the occupations inside, but what's happening is the original occupations, the one that's still going on here, it's still going on in some other places.
New York.
In Washington, other places. No, New York's actually one where it's moving inside. Were in essence consciousness-raising tools. But ultimately, the whole fight, the whole movement is about raising attention to, frankly, what's wrong in this country and what can be fixed, because the people in Occupy love this country as much as the Tea Party thinks they love this country, as much as all these other folks do. Is they all have different visions for what fixes it, but the folks involved in Occupy ultimately believe a fairer, more equal America makes us a stronger nation.
Well, I think it's well documented that the Tea Party activists certainly reshaped the dialogue after 2000.
They won in 2010.
Right, and well, they did support specific candidates, and with unequal success. Some of their candidates won, some of them didn't win.
Look at the damage. From my perspective, the damage you're doing in Washington.
Well, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you say that the Occupy movement is there to establish fairness and equality for Americans. Well, the Tea Party probably think the same thing.
Well, I guess no. I think they have different perspectives. I think the Tea Party believes they're trying to give people opportunities to each become as rich as they can, to do things like that they believe in. I think Occupy believes that we actually have to ensure there are pathways to the middle class, to enlarge the middle class, because having a solid middle class is essential to this country. We've had our manufacturing jobs be shipped overseas. Companies make a fortune. We have it right now where people are paying the lowest taxes in this country, federal taxes, even though everyone thinks they're so high right now, the lowest federal taxes right now since 1953. They're significantly lower today than they were under Ronald Reagan. And in exchange for those lower taxes, there are less services, the quality of life in this country has gone down, our jobs have been shipped overseas. That is America better off today or worse off today than when it was when we had higher taxes? You go back to the Eisenhower period, you go back to periods like that, and I think people will tell you there's less opportunity in this country for people to get ahead. People are struggling to survive, and we're seeing our jobs, our wealth shipped offshore.
So do you think that the strength of the Tea Party effort has been mollified now by this reaction that's been now manifest in the Occupy movement? Has that kind of diluted the Tea Party message, and has it allowed moderates and progressives to now be able to come out of the shadows and identify themselves as moderate and progressives, and they don't have to hide from the onslaught of the Tea Party rhetoric?
I think you are seeing that, but part of it is, like I said, again, maybe this is one where my mother and I disagree a little bit, in that I come from a more leftist part of the party than does she. But
you often characterize yourself as a libertarian.
Well, no,
You used to.
Used to. I did. I moved away from that philosophy many years ago.
Okay.
That I am one ultimately who believes that philosophy is the Tea Party philosophy, and I ultimately found that philosophy one that is selfish for a country. It doesn't have people invest in essence in the dues of citizenship and what's involved. It doesn't build the infrastructure. It weakens our country in the guise of selfishness. And ultimately, while there's sacrifice has to be shared if you want to build this country, make it strong again. You look at examples we have in Europe, and God forbid we say, oh my God, look, they have health care, in Europe, so that's socialist. I think it's a terrible thing in this country that you can get sick and lose all your savings. Do you know where else in the world that can happen to you? Nowhere else. Only in the United States. I guess that's the freedom some people are fighting for, things like that.
So to the extent that progressivism is now gaining a little bit of a foothold in our country, and I see...
And Elizabeth Warren is one who's very vocal about being a progressive, to give you an example, and she's probably, I think, the top-raising Senate candidate in the nation.
This is Elizabeth Warren, who's running for Senate in Massachusetts.
And she's raising money all over the country just from her speeches that she gives, and she's talking about we need to tax the rich more, we need to actually spend more, we need to enlarge the government, and we need to ensure jobs for people.
So she sounds like a true liberal.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so getting to my point, is
Or
liberalism
progressive, technically.
Okay, so is liberalism becoming a little bit more in vogue as opposed to where it sat 4 years ago when those who were self-described liberals had to sort of like cower away from those who kind of captured the microphone?
You have some of that. I mean, the difference too is the term liberal versus progressive. Liberal is still seen as the socially liberal, but kind of also the war hawks, the Scoop Jacksons, the Humphreys, going back in history, Kennedy and Johnson.
You're dating
and so on.
yourself.
But progressives actually are much more tied to also, I think, a more peace movement type of philosophy, along with the role of government in people's lives, that there is a proper role. But yeah, I think it's growing, and actually, I think when you actually are willing to stand up and say what you believe in, you motivate your base more to show up and vote, which is what happened in 2010. The Tea Party got their base out, but the progressive community didn't really see candidates who excited them because most of the Democrats were running around trying to sound like, in essence, Republican light.
So those who pay attention to the news have seen where the president has come out in support of the Occupy movement, or at least some of its messages, and he's been criticized for that, certainly by the conservatives. But do you feel that there's a nexus that can be claimed by these two, by the president and the Occupy movement, that might lead him to the success for re-election in 2012?
I don't think necessarily that. I think part of what you're seeing with him embracing that message is the same anger that underlied the Tea Party movement is the same anger, not a different one, the same anger underlying the Occupy movement. Both, and there's overlaps, by the way.
A sort of different, disenfranchised anger, like, you know.
Same disenfranchised people, they believe in different solutions, perhaps, to what gets there. It's the same anger and the same issues running through them. Both groups were against the bailouts. Occupy and them both had issues.
But I think, not to interrupt you, but I think many people would say that the Tea Party fiscal agenda has long since been put in the back and as a back burner issue. And when you read the placards and listen to many of the speeches, it is moved away from financial issues and it does talk more about social issues. And
I'm not saying that. I think
Tea Party
is entirely fiscal.
No. They're anti-immigrant, for example.
Right. Their message has been much broader than just fiscal issues.
But that's a split because you have a libertarian wing of the Tea Party, you have the other. You have the
Commissioner Gunzberger, what is your take on that?
I think that the Tea Party has been a very conservative factor in the Republican Party, and that's why we see a lot of the stalemates in Congress. I mean, look what happened a couple of weeks ago when Boehner took the party and wouldn't let them pass the middle-class tax cut. Who was leading that charge?
Well, I've got to tell you, here's what I'm going to sound shocking here. I respect a Jim DeMint or a Rand Paul or a Ron Paul a lot more than I do a lot of my own Democrats, because at least they will hold their ground on principle and stand up for what they believe in, versus my folks who often want to sell out everything to walk away with one or two slices of the loaf of bread, when in essence we've compromised between food and poison, and that compromised poison always wins.
But don't we often see in the Tea Party effort issues other than fiscal issues that seem to permeate the debate and the dialogue? I mean, oftentimes some of these Republican candidates, when they're speaking to Tea Party groups, they talk about immigration, they talk about gay marriage, they talk about abortion. They bring these other issues up, and they're certainly on the signs that I see as they parade in front of the Target store at the corner of Oakland and US 1 every Saturday morning.
What about health care?
Health care as well.
They see that as financial.
They don't want people to have health care. But if you go to a member of that party that has Medicare, ask them if they want us to take their Medicare away.
Well, that's a good point. So I guess the point that I'm trying to bring this discussion up to where if this Occupy Fort Lauderdale movement,
Occupy Wall Street movement. Really.
Well, the Occupy Fort Lauderdale movement, as it's associated with the national Occupy movements around the country, is if it's helping to dilute or mollify the Tea Party, the strength that it has experienced in the past. If in fact that would translate into successes where many of the conservatives lose their seats in Congress, whether it be the House or the Senate, and the president is reelected, does that spell any measure of success for the LGBT community for national issues that will come before it after the 2012 election? Do you feel that some of the defeat that the LGBT community experienced this past session, such as the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, the overturning of the Defense of Marriage Act, do you think that there's a possibility that based on the Occupy movement and the strength that the president may somehow achieve in an indirect way from that movement, that the gay community has much more to look forward to with a second term with the president?
Progressives coming into office will always benefit the LGBT community. However, by the way, even some younger and more moderate folks on the other side of the aisle would help. The problem you have is, although, like I said, it depends where they fall. Again, the Ron Paul types, Ron Paul supports gay marriage. It all depends where they fall.
He's not even on the radar. But
he's
not even, doesn't even have a percent.
I got to tell you something, he's going to win Iowa in 3 days.
You think he's going to win Iowa?
I think he's going to win Iowa.
You know what?
He won't win the nomination, he will win Iowa.
You really need to see is the middle class have an uprising and a kumbaya moment with the Occupy movements so that they can make a difference. If we don't change Congress, this country cannot go forward.
In other words, if the House does not return to a majority Democrat, is what you're saying, and so that it can be a workable Congress with the president, then you're saying that we'll suffer another stalemate government.
I don't see hope if we can't change Congress.
But the problem you have is the public seems to like mixed parties controlling different things as a balance system, so they both...
Where are you seeing that?
You see that in polling data where they don't like it whenever you have a president controlling both houses.
But the Congress has a 9% approval rating. So how can you say that they like different parties?
Because actually the polling consistently has shown that over the years. They like having the president and the Congress being a different party as a balance. However, that causes the same gridlock that they then complain about.
Well, that only worked under Clinton. Because under Clinton, you had a situation where you had a different. Strangely enough, that's when you also had Gingrich, who was the speaker, and for some reason, they seemed to somehow be able to iron out compromise.
Reagan was also able to work with the Democratic Congress with Tip O'Neill and others.
Okay, so there you had a whole different culture. Today, you have a completely different culture.
But it's the voters, the older voters with the fond memories of Ronald Reagan, how well he governed, and even the Bill Clinton era, that is still hearkening back to that nostalgia that doesn't exist in this current culture.
Okay, so since as Commissioner Gunzberger, you said a couple of weeks ago when Congressman Boehner couldn't seem to get his majority together to even pass a middle class tax cut with the Social Security tax reduction. Is America sick and tired of the Tea Party movement strangling our progress in this country and getting even the slightest thing done?
I hope so. I mean, I'm sick and tired of it. But I can't speak for all of America. I just am hoping that people wake up. And one of the worst things that can happen in this year is if people are so turned off, especially in Broward County, the Democrats, because they're disgusted, if they don't vote, that's a vote for the Republicans.
Let me ask you something. We spoke about the local level and we spoke about the national level. Let's talk a little bit about the state level. We have a legislature that is by far in the hands of Republicans. We have the governor's post that's in the hands of a Republican.
Although by the legislature and the governor, two Republican groups don't like each other.
Yeah, but they don't like each other over things that it's
who's in charge.
It's more a power thing as opposed to a policy thing. It's like who can be more extreme than the next. It's not as if they're looking for any kind of middle ground.
Right now, I give that award to Rick Scott.
Yeah.
We have to see what happens if they challenge the new districts. If the Democratic Party goes to the state Supreme Court and challenges the districts as they've been drawn. Because as they've been drawn, although the Republicans think they're bulletproof, because they've damaged a couple of theirs. They have, if we can't change the new districts, you're not going to see any progress.
Although I want to throw one thing out there about Broward. When you mentioned about the voting,
Right.
the one thing that you didn't mention, which is true, is if you want to see change in Florida, it actually does take voting. And by the way, of the 67 counties in Florida, every presidential election, every major governor election, just so you know, Broward among the 67 counties is always in the top 3 for worst voting turnout in the state of Florida, every election, including the last time.
Well, I know the last time it was terrible, and
The Obama election still was terrible.
But I do recall that in when Lawton Childs was running for his last race, he attributed the turnout in Broward for his
We
success.
delivered a big enough margin, but our turnout percentage was still lower than anywhere else in the state.
There's concern by many who believe that the Democratic Party here in Broward County has sort of been sitting on its laurels here, and that had we turned out another 50 to 80,000 votes in the last election, which is really not a lot, that we probably would have had a Democratic governor today than a Republican governor.
Well, had we had a Democratic candidate who was worth voting for, who excited the base, might have helped too.
Well, but instead of trying to demonize the candidate, I just want to know.
I held my breath and voted for Alex Sink. I can't see how anyone would have been excited about her or want to turn out for her.
Okay, but apparently the numbers just weren't there in terms of the Democratic vote here in Broward County. And does it take a candidate alone for that to happen, or is there something that those in the party can do to try to ignite the interest of people to go out there and
There
vote?
are some new movements in Broward County. There was a group that started Team Broward, and it's now become Awake Broward, trying to get people registered who haven't voted and to make sure that they're going to go to the polls. The supervisor sent out absentee ballots to every registered voter, but not quite. Trying to...
Well, there's the Organizing for America group, too.
Yes, so that there are a lot of groups trying to make a difference, because 2012 is a pivotal year.
But
This year is going to make a difference, and if we don't wake up these people, pity us, and it's our fault.
And by the way, yes, what drives turnout? Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's excitement, enthusiasm over what's at the top of your ticket. Or last time, 2010, the Tea Party was excited and the Democrats were not, over what damage they could do to the enemy. Basically, people are motivated by being polarized, either for something or against it. And it's those emotions that drag people out. Bland elections don't do it.
Well, do you think that, let's say the Democrats are not able to come up with an exciting candidate for governor next time around, do you think that that the governor, Scott, will still be reelected despite his...
Don't know if he's going to survive. Well, that's not for 3 more years, but that's... Who's to say if he's even going to survive his primary? Because there is a effort by national Republicans to try to convince, in fact, all 3 of the Republican cabinet members to consider primarying him.
This is the top of our ballot will be Bill Nelson.
In 2012.
Yes.
Well, under Obama. Now, if we can just find
right.
the 2008 Obama, we've got a decent candidate. Now, Bill Nelson, I mean, he's got all the charisma of oatmeal, so that's kind of a problem. But his voting record isn't so bad. And oatmeal's pretty good for you if you like it. It is pretty good
And
for
it
you.
reduces your cholesterol.
Right. So in some ways, maybe equating him with oatmeal's okay. But especially since maybe the other side is kind of a bitter, watered down gruel. So I'll take the oatmeal. So it is progress, but you don't get excited. No one's going to turn out and wave signs and really work hard for oatmeal.
So you're saying at the state level, then, it seems like those who look at things progressively have very little hope to see any real change at the state level, because we'll still have a Republican-dominated legislature, and we'll probably still have a Republican governor.
Well, we will. There's no governor election next year.
No, I'm saying in the near future.
Well, what we're hoping is that the Obama that we saw in '08 returns in this year and excites the base.
Do you think he's any different 4 years ago than he is today as a person?
He's more cautious as president than he was as a candidate. He was more inspiring. He although he did transition from candidate mode to governing mode isn't as exciting.
Well, but it shouldn't be. You know, governing mode is all about getting down to brass tacks. But
when Congress is out to embarrass you, to basically make you fail, to make this country fail as their agenda, if that's all you've got, then go back to your mode that inspired people, because that's also what turns people around.
Well, do you think he was naive? I mean, a person at his level, do you think as a national figure he was naive as to the intentions of the opposing party?
I'll give you, I think he thought he, through the logic of what he's saying, of just how right it is, and just the look, if we just do this, both of us win. Just the reasoning alone should have won them over, but you can't reason with unreasonable people.
Okay, but shouldn't he have thought that was going to be their approach? I mean, the Republicans have never really treated Democrats in any way that would allow them to succeed.
I'd love to play poker with him because he'd keep giving away cards if he maybe stay at the table. Is the problem? Look at healthcare. He took single payer, his administration took single payer off the table before they even started negotiating because, well, we know Republicans won't support that, so let's move the line over to here. And then you go ask a handful of Republicans, if you support, what do you want to support health care? Because we want to have like you 5 senators with us. And they say, well, if you gave us A, B, and C, we'll support it. So the White House said, okay, we'll put A, B, and C in. And they go, doesn't really work for us. Now we want X, Y, Z.
We get it. I understand.
And then by the end of the day, after doing all that working with the moderate Republicans, how many Republican senators voted for the health care plan after giving them every compromise they asked for? 0.
Right.
So is there a lesson from that? Yes.
So
how are we doing with that surtax on millionaires? I think it died a few weeks ago.
Commissioner Gunzberger, you're going to be retiring in a couple of years.
3.
Tell us 3. Tell us what your plans are after that.
Oh, I have a lot of plans. Since I came from a background of volunteerism, I'm going back to that. I want to do Each One Teach One, which is adult literacy in our libraries. I also was a therapist. I want to volunteer at the Mental Health Association. I have not been able to travel to places that were off limits because of when my vacation was. Australia, New Zealand, China, the Far East is on my agenda, and I also want to spend more time with my grandchildren.
She doesn't like rain, so she can't go to places during rainy season.
Other than that, I guess I'll sit home and do nothing.
Do nothing, right. I can't see that.
Maybe you should start a radio show, too.
Maybe. You could be co-hosts. Well, Ron, tell us a little bit about what your goals are in the future. Do you intend to be more involved in mainstream movements such as these Occupy movements, which appeal to more than just the gay community, or do you think you might be in a position to perhaps take on more of a role within the gay community?
I got to admit, in general, I am much more of the lone wolf type. I find I'm the only person I agree with 100% of the time. In general, that kind of holds true for me. But
to form the Gunzberger Party.
Well, so basically, I'm not on the Democratic Executive Committee because I don't want to sign a loyalty oath, because there even are some Democrats, I won't name which, I sometimes don't feel like voting for, frankly, to skip races entirely because some voters aren't worth voting. Some candidates in certain races aren't worth voting for, even though I'll vote every election if I missed one. But with my website, with other things, with politics1.com, I have a vehicle for getting out a voice. I have hundreds of thousands of page views, frankly, every week. So I got an audience for my message. I enjoy what I do.
Well,
and going to the beach and skating.
And I appreciate being part of our audience, and hopefully our audience has appreciated the really great stuff that we've heard tonight.
And considering this is New Year's Day, you don't look hungover. So
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Happy New Year to both of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you, and I wish you both the best. And stay tuned for our show next week, 9 o'clock on WFTL 850 AM. Thank you.